He said what? I asked, even though I'd already heard every word. The hallway wasn't wide, but sound traveled clearly. My knees weren't what they used to be, but the house had settled into itself over the years, and I knew exactly where to stop to hear the living room. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. Not at first. I was just coming back from the porch, my gloves still in my hand, when I heard my name. She's still alive? Seriously? We need the house, Dad. You said she wasn't doing well. It was Matthew, my grandson, not some bratty teenager either, 24 with a real estate license and a brand new watch that cost more than my car. His voice had the edge of someone who thought they were owed something, like a kid being made to wait for dessert. I told you to be patient, my son, Alan, replied. She's old. It's only a matter of time. No need to make a fuss. So we just wait around while that dump rots? We could sell it now, flip it, turn a profit. My buddy Brent said that area's getting hot. My hand clenched the glove tighter. That dump was my home. 47 years. I had painted every room myself, even the ceiling in the laundry, balancing on a chair with a roller and a prayer. The garden out back? Every flower planted by hand. The living room window still bore a tiny scratch from when Alan had run his trike into it, and they were calling it a liability, an asset. Dead weight. I stepped back quietly and returned to the kitchen. Sat down. The gloves still lay in my lap, fingers curled. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. That's not how I was raised. My tea had gone cold. I didn't bother warming it. They need the house. As if I were a worn-out suitcase they'd politely wait to fall apart, then carry off to Goodwill. Alan and Matthew didn't stay long. I heard the door shut, heard the engine start. The car pulled away with that smooth electric purr, probably the one I'd helped finance 2 years ago when Alan unexpectedly needed to replace his. I stayed seated. I needed to think. They were right about one thing. I wasn't doing great. The winters were harsher now, or maybe my bones were just tired of pretending otherwise. The stairs creaked louder. My joints ached deeper. Sometimes I had to sit on the edge of the bed for a full 5 minutes just to will myself upright. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. And I'd be damned if I let them make my exit for me. I looked around the kitchen, the faded curtains, the chipped counter tile where Alan had dropped the mixing bowl when he was 6, the old wall clock James brought home from the flea market, still ticking faithfully, 1 second at a time. This house wasn't money. It was memory. It was mine. I stood up slowly, knees protesting, and made my way to the file drawer in the hallway. Pulled it open. Second folder from the left. Deed and title. I hadn't looked at it in years. No mortgage. Paid in full. My name the only one on it. For now. I closed the drawer and turned toward the hallway mirror. Looked at myself. The woman in the glass wasn't the same one who'd moved in all those decades ago. Her hair was white now. Her hands thinner, but still capable. Her back a little stooped, but her eyes were clear. I wasn't going to wait around like meat in a freezer. I picked up the phone and dialed. Hello? This is Mayfield Legal Associates. How may I direct your call? Yes, I said calmly. I'd like to speak to someone about changing my will and the title to my property. The voice paused. Certainly, ma'am. May I ask what kind of change you're looking to make? I looked down at my hands. Steady now. The decision was already made. I'd like to sign it over, I said, to someone who isn't waiting for me to die. James and I bought the house in 1974. It was a flat-roofed 2-bedroom ranch with peeling shutters and a front porch that leaned slightly left, like it was tired of standing up straight. But we were young and in love, and the realtor had said, "It has good bones," which made us both laugh. We were the kind of people who believed in fixing things. James had been a mechanic before the war, then worked the rail yard after. He knew how to build, how to wire, how to make things last. I knew how to budget, how to stretch a meal, how to read a manual even if it wasn't written for women. Together we made the house into a home. One paint can, one paycheck at a time. The kitchen was our first project. Yellow cabinets, a linoleum floor I still remember laying down on our knees, cursing the air bubbles. James chipped the corner of the sink trying to install it himself, and for 30 years I refused to replace it. That chip was us. Stubborn, imperfect, but ours. Alan was born 2 years later. He took his first steps on the living room carpet and split his chin on the coffee table edge 2 weeks after that. There's still a faint stain on the rug from the blood, even though I tried everything to get it out. Every time I passed that spot, I remembered the way James scooped him up, calm, capable, while I panicked over the mess. We planted the maple tree in the backyard the spring Alan turned 5. James wanted it for shade, but I wanted it because I liked the way its leaves turned fire red in the fall. Every year, I raked them myself, even when James got sick and couldn't help anymore. I never minded. When he died, so suddenly, a heart attack on a Tuesday morning, the silence in the house grew louder than the ticking clock. Alan was already grown by then, newly married. He came for the funeral, said all the right things, and then drifted back to his own life like a boat cutting through water. I didn't blame him. Not then. In the years that followed, I filled the house with things that wouldn't leave. Photos, books, baking smells. I joined a quilting group. I volunteered at the church pantry. I kept going. Alan had 2 boys. Matthew was the younger. I remember holding him the day he was born, his tiny face screwed up like he was already unimpressed with the world. He used to call me Nana Ace because I always had a candy in my pocket and a solution to whatever toy he broke. When did that change? Somewhere between birthday cards and tuition checks, I suppose. Because I paid. For his summer programs, his car insurance, his emergency flight to Europe that turned out to be a vacation with his girlfriend. And I never asked for a thing in return, not even gratitude. Just a call now and then. Maybe a thank you. Instead, I got a whispered insult through a wall. "She's still alive?" I couldn't unhear it. Couldn't scrub it away like the stain on the rug. That's the thing about words. Once they land, they root. I spent the rest of that afternoon taking mental inventory. Not of my possessions, but of the moments I'd handed over. Quietly. Willingly. Like handing slices of cake to guests who never looked you in the eye. There were signs before that day. The Christmas they forgot to invite me, but blamed a lost card. The time Matthew borrowed my car and brought it back with a cracked bumper, said, "It was like that." The way Alan always called on payday, never just because. And still, I stayed soft. Still, I kept hoping they'd remember that I was more than the woman who signed checks. But now, I was done hoping. I didn't tell them I was going to the lawyer. I didn't give them the dignity of warning. I'd given enough already. My years, my money, my home. They had mistaken kindness for weakness. A common mistake. The kind you only make once. The next morning, I stood in my kitchen, holding a dish towel, and watching the kettle boil like it was going to tell me what to do next. The silence in the house wasn't new. James had been gone nearly 18 years. But something about that morning made it heavier. Heavier, but not colder. There's a moment after something breaks inside you when you stop grieving it. You just begin to look around and ask yourself, what now? I made tea, sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the phone. Not to call anyone, just to see if it would ring. It didn't. No one called to check in, to apologize, to say maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe Matthew was tired. Maybe Alan had misspoken. Maybe. But I knew better. And that made everything clearer. Around 11, I put on my sweater and walked 2 houses down to see Nora. She was 3 years older than me, half as mobile and twice as sharp. The kind of woman who could smell a lie through the phone. She opened the door with her usual frown and a cardigan that had seen more seasons than most marriages. "Agnes Hollister," she said, squinting at me like I might have been a hallucination. "You don't visit unless your heart's broken or your bread's gone bad. Which is it today?" I smiled faintly. Bit of both. She let me in and set about making coffee. The strong, bitter kind that left you thinking about your past mistakes and your next move. We sat in her front room, 2 women in armchairs older than their grandsons, the silence between us just friendly enough to hold a confession. "I heard something yesterday," I said finally. "From Matthew and Alan." Nora didn't nod. She didn't ask what. She just waited. "They were talking about the house, about me, about how I'm taking too long." Still, she didn't react. Just leaned back and sipped her coffee, as if she'd heard it all before. Maybe she had. "I thought maybe I was imagining things," I went on. "That I'd misunderstood, but I didn't. They want me out. Not in so many words, but the kind that don't need saying." Nora set down her cup. "So what are you going to do?" That was what I liked about her. No coddling, no soft platitudes. Just, what now? "I already called a lawyer. I'm changing the deed. And the will." She raised her eyebrows, then smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly. Just satisfied. Like she'd been waiting for me to finally grow the spine I'd buried under casseroles and polite excuses. "Well," she said, "I suppose they forgot who built that house to begin with. I think they think I owe them something. They always do, until you say no." She pulled a box from under her side table and flipped through it. "Let me find you the number of my notary," she said. "He did my estate last year. Thorough, discreet, doesn't charge extra for urgency." I reached for the card she held out and stared at her hand. Wrinkled, veined, steady. "Do you ever feel guilty?" I asked. Nora scoffed. "For what? Not letting someone eat me alive with a smile on their face?" I laughed. It surprised me. Back home, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the thick brown envelope I kept for someday. Birth certificates, tax returns. The old life insurance policy James had taken out when Alan was born, back when we both believed in long futures and good intentions. I sorted it all, stacked it in a new folder, labeled it Property Transfer, Urgent. It wasn't fear I felt. It was relief. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket and a pad of paper. The moon was a thumbnail in the sky. The street quiet, like always. I began to write. Not a letter. A list. Of things I wouldn't tolerate anymore. Of people I'd help, and those I wouldn't. Of everything I owned, and what I wanted done with it. And at the very top, in careful block letters, "My house is not your future." The envelope came on a Thursday, tucked among grocery flyers and a credit card offer addressed to resident. It was plain, white, with the bank's logo stamped discreetly in the corner. Harmless at first glance. until I saw the name on the return address, Matthew L. Hollister, my grandson. I opened it at the kitchen counter with the kind of care you give to something that might explode in your hands. Inside was a printed form, an authorization request, pre-filled with my name, my address, and the property parcel number. The kind of document you sign when you're too tired to read the fine print. The kind that, if filed, would allow someone else to inquire and act on your behalf regarding asset valuation, refinance options, and transfer of ownership. There was even a sticky note at the top. Just in case we want to help you later, Nana. No rush. Love, Matt. No rush. I stared at the handwriting. Bold, slightly sloppy, like it belonged to someone in a hurry, probably scribbled on his car dashboard between lunch meetings. Just in case. They weren't waiting anymore. They were moving. I folded the letter back up, placed it in the envelope, and slid it under the old cutting board drawer. Let it sit there like a roach you've caught, but don't want to squash just yet. I didn't call him. Didn't mention it to Alan either. Let them think I was mulling it over, too frail or too confused to act quickly. The more invisible they thought I was, the better. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed the notary Nora had given me. His name was Wallace, and he answered like someone who rarely got personal calls. His voice was clipped, efficient. "I was referred to you by Nora Belling," I said. "She speaks highly of you." "That's good. She threatens to haunt people who disappoint her." He chuckled. "What can I help you with, ma'am?" I explained my situation carefully. I didn't mention the specific words I'd overheard or how long the betrayal had been brewing, just that I needed to secure the deed, to move it somewhere safe, somewhere out of reach. "I'm not selling the house," I clarified. "I'm transferring ownership." "To whom?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But not family. That part's non-negotiable." There was a pause. "You're aware this will remove any inheritance claims?" "I'm not looking to leave souvenirs," I interrupted. "I'm looking to leave on my own terms." He said he could draw up a revocable transfer on death deed, or, if I was sure, an immediate quitclaim. Either way, it would require identity verification, a witness, and a filing with the county. All legal. All clean. We scheduled an appointment for the following Tuesday. After I hung up, I stood at the window and looked out at the porch. The swing still creaked when the wind caught it. The railing needed repainting. But it was mine. Every chipped brick and sun-faded plank. And they had looked at it like salvage. That afternoon, I called the city office. Requested my property tax file, zoning map, and assessed value. I wanted to know what I owned. Not just emotionally, legally, financially, square foot by square foot. A young woman on the other end of the line said, "Oh, the Hollister place? That's in a prime area now. You're sitting on a gold mine." "No, dear," I thought. "I'm sitting in my kitchen, drinking lukewarm tea and trying not to drown in other people's expectations. But thank you for confirming what Matthew's eyes already told me." That evening, I heard a knock at the door. Alan. He was holding a grocery bag and wearing that stiff smile he pulled out when he needed something. "Brought you some things," he said. "Milk, soup, those crackers you like." I stepped aside without comment. Let him in. Watched him scan the living room like a realtor on a quiet showing. We sat for a while, him sipping tea, me pretending not to notice his eyes darting toward the file cabinet. He didn't ask if I'd gotten the envelope. He didn't need to, and I didn't give him the satisfaction of bringing it up. Because the next time they'd hear about the deed, it wouldn't be in conversation. It would be in silence, from a stranger's name etched on the county record. Alan didn't stay long. 30 minutes, maybe less. Just enough time to check the corners of the house with his eyes while pretending to ask about my joints. He left the grocery bag on the counter, patted my shoulder like he'd done me a favor, and drove off in the car. I helped him buy 10 years ago. I didn't touch the crackers. Something about them felt bought. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, counting the slow rotations, and listening to the house breathe around me. James used to say, "Old houses talk to you, if you listened right." I never quite believed him until lately. Around 2 in the morning, I got up and made a list. Not just of documents I'd need, I already had those, but of people I'd need to contact, and one person I still had to find. Because Wallace could draw up the documents, and I could sign them. But a deed needs a name, a recipient, a person to hand the future to. And I hadn't found mine yet. It couldn't be someone close, not family, not even distant. That would leave room for challenge, for bitterness. It had to be someone unexpected. Someone with no claim and therefore no debt. Someone who'd see the house as a gift, not a transaction. I thought about the boy at the library. Quiet, polite, always reading thick books about architecture. He helped me once when I dropped my glasses. Or the young woman at the pharmacy who always asked how I was doing like she meant it. Or the woman who used to clean my gutters until her husband passed and she moved away. None felt quite right. But I had time. On Monday, I went to the attic. I hadn't been up there in years. The pull-down ladder groaned like a guilty conscience. The air smelled of dust and cedar and something else. Memory, maybe. Boxes. So many boxes. James's army footlocker. Alan's grade school art projects. Christmas decorations from when tinsel was still fashionable. And at the back, tucked under an old quilt, the wooden chest. That chest hadn't been opened since James died. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in his sharp, looping hand. Some addressed to me, others to Alan when he was small. Some were love notes, others instructions, thoughts, worries. James had always been the type to prepare. I used to joke he'd write a to-do list for his own funeral if he could. I sat on the floor and read through them until the light through the attic window began to shift. And there, near the bottom, was one that stopped me. It was titled, simply, "In Case." I opened it with shaking hands. In it, James wrote about the house, about what it meant to him, how he'd always hoped it would be a place that stayed in good hands. Not just blood, but good. He wrote, "If they don't respect what it took to build it, don't let them profit off its walls." I sat there a long time, holding that letter. He knew, even then, that the time might come when family wouldn't mean what it used to, that the roof we'd put over their heads might one day be seen as currency. When I came down from the attic, I knew what I had to do. I called Wallace and confirmed our appointment for Tuesday. I laid out my documents. I prepared my ID, tax records, the deed, and I pulled out one last blank envelope. This one wasn't for the bank. It was for Matthew. I didn't write much, just enough. "Dear Matthew, I received your form. I'm not confused. I'm not forgetful. I'm not dead. And this house is not yours. Nana." I sealed it, placed it by the door. Let him open that one next time he came sniffing for opportunity. The office smelled like old paper and quiet judgment, the kind of place where nothing moved unless it had a signature and a date. Wallace was waiting at the front desk when I arrived, tall and trim in that starched shirt way that said he ironed his own collars. He stood when he saw me and gave a respectful nod, not overdone, not patronizing. I appreciated that. "Mrs. Hollister," he said, "you brought everything?" "I did," I replied, holding up the manila folder like it was a weapon. In a way, it was. We sat down in his small office, the walls lined with certificates and neatly framed legal articles. Understanding revocable transfers. Probate and you. It was a room built to say, here, things are done properly. He started with the basics, confirming my identity, making copies of my license, skimming the original deed. I watched him work with the kind of focus you give a surgeon. He wasn't chatty, and I liked that. There's no room for small talk when you're undoing 40 years of assumed inheritance. "I can prepare both versions," he said. "A revocable transfer on death deed and a quitclaim for immediate transfer. That way you have options." "No," I said. "Just the quitclaim." Wallace looked up. "You're sure? Once it's filed, the house is no longer legally yours. You can't take it back unless the new owner agrees to sign it back." "I'm sure," I said. "I've spent my whole life watching people smile while they measure the value of what I give. I'm done handing things over like loose change." He nodded. "We'll need a witness, someone with no connection to you or the recipient. I can arrange that." "I'll bring someone," I said. "Any idea who the transferee will be?" "Not yet," I admitted, "but I'll know them when I meet them." He blinked, then, to his credit, didn't question it. He just made a note on the form and handed me a pen. "You can sign here to authorize preparation," he said. "You'll come back when you've chosen the recipient." I signed. Clean, steady handwriting, no shaking. By the time I left the office, the sky had turned overcast. One of those Carolina days where the clouds sit low, like they're waiting for someone to make a decision. I walked instead of calling a cab, just to think. 3 blocks from the office, I passed a cafe I'd never noticed before. It had a narrow stoop, mismatched chairs, and a sign in the window that said, "We roast hope daily." I almost rolled my eyes. Too cute by half. But the smell of fresh bread pulled me in. Inside, a young man with dark curls and ink-stained fingers was trying to fix the espresso machine, cursing under his breath in that defeated, polite way people do when they don't want customers to hear them lose it. He looked up and smiled. "Sorry for the noise, ma'am. You want coffee?" "I want to know if that thing's going to blow." He laughed. Only emotionally. I took a seat by the window. He brought me a muffin on the house. "Fig and almond," he said. And we got to talking. His name was Ezra. He'd bought the place from an old couple who were retiring. He was 28. Rented the apartment above. Said he still couldn't believe the bank had approved his loan. "Don't know what I'm doing most days," he confessed, looking out at the rain. "But I show up, and I clean up, and I try to make something worth staying for." Something about the way he said it stayed with me. I came back the next day, and the one after. Not because I was lonely, but because I was watching. The way he spoke to the old man with Parkinson's who spilled his tea. The way he helped the woman in scrubs carry her lunch order to the bus stop. The way he noticed when I didn't finish my muffin and brought me a fresh one, just in case the first was dry. I was testing him. He didn't know it. On the 4th day, I left a tip and a question on the napkin. "Have you ever owned a house?" He blinked when he read it, then looked at me across the room. "No," he said. "Why?" I shrugged. "Just asking." He didn't push, just nodded, like someone who knew better than to rush old women and their riddles. That night, I called Wallace. I found him, I said. Wallace didn't ask questions. Not many, at least. Name, he said, pen poised. Ezra Linden, I answered. He jotted it down. Relation to you? None. He raised an eyebrow. I'll need proof of that, and a witness. You'll have it. I hung up the phone and felt a strange stillness inside. Not cold, not regretful. Just still, like a room after everyone's left and you're finally alone with your own thoughts. The kind of stillness that lets you hear your heart beating again, steady and unapologetic. That afternoon, I walked over to Nora's. She opened the door in her usual way, annoyed, skeptical, deeply loyal. Her cardigan had a new hole in the elbow. I need you to come with me Tuesday morning, I said, to Wallace's office, as a witness. Witness to what? To me handing the house over. She narrowed her eyes. To that cafe boy? Yes. She didn't ask why or scoff or launch into her usual tirade about strangers and bad decisions. Instead, she stepped aside and said, "You want coffee or whiskey?" "Whiskey," I replied. We drank in her sitting room, legs tucked under crocheted throws, two women with nothing left to prove to anyone. She didn't question me again. I think she understood the deeper truth. When someone's taken everything from you but your name, the last thing you surrender is your choice. On Monday, I walked back to the cafe. Ezra was wiping down tables, humming something without a tune. When he saw me, he smiled. Not brightly, not out of obligation, but with the quiet warmth of someone genuinely glad you came back. I sat by the window. "Busy?" I asked. He shook his head. "Just dodging dish duty." I placed an envelope on the table between us. Legal-sized, cream-colored, sealed. He glanced at it, then at me. "What's this?" "It's a deed transfer," I said calmly. "For my house." He blinked. I don't understand." "You don't have to. But you should read it." He opened it with cautious fingers the way you'd unwrap something fragile. Inside was Wallace's prepared quitclaim deed, unsigned. I'd left the transferee line blank, but the rest was filled out. "Why would you give me your house?" he asked quietly. "Because you're the only person I've met in months who looks people in the eye without calculating what they're worth." He stared at me. "I've seen how you treat people," I went on. "You do more good in this cafe than some folks do in a lifetime, and you never once asked me who I was, or what I had." Ezra ran a hand through his hair, suddenly unsure what to do with himself. "This feels like a test." "It's not. It's a choice. You can say no." He looked down at the paper, then back up at me. "If I say yes, what happens to you?" "I stay," I said. "It's not about leaving. It's about deciding who holds the key when I'm gone." He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he nodded. "If you're sure, then I'll make sure it means something." That was all I needed to hear. Tuesday morning was gray and spitting rain. I wore my navy coat and a scarf James had given me on our last Christmas together. Nora picked me up. She didn't comment on the scarf, but I saw the way her mouth tightened at the sight of it. Ezra met us at Wallace's office. He was wearing a collared shirt that didn't quite fit and shoes he'd clearly polished twice that morning. Wallace was professional, as always. He checked our IDs, explained every clause, made sure no one was being coerced. "Are you doing this freely, Mrs. Hollister?" he asked. "Yes." "And you, Mr. Linden, you understand that this makes you legal owner of the property immediately?" Ezra looked at me. I nodded once. "Yes, sir," he said. We signed. Wallace notarized. Nora scowled at the penmanship, but witnessed anyway. It took 43 minutes. Afterward, we all stood outside under the low clouds, breath fogging the air. Ezra looked down at the envelope now in his hand, containing the certified deed. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "You've already said everything that mattered." He nodded, eyes damp. Then, for the first time since James died, I saw a man cry over something not lost, but gained. I didn't tell Alan, not yet. I went home after the signing and made myself a ham sandwich, the same way I always had. Thin slice of tomato, mustard, no cheese. James used to say a sandwich wasn't real unless it dripped. I'd always disagreed. I sat at the table, took slow bites, and waited for the weight of what I'd done to arrive. It never did. No guilt, no regret, just quiet. Ezra had offered to walk me home after we left Wallace's office. I declined. I wanted to feel the weight of my steps, to remember that this decision had come from me, not from fear or pressure or spite. He didn't press, just said, "If you need anything, I'm a call away." That boy had more decency in his handshake than Matthew had in a year's worth of texts. I sat with my tea and thought about the next part. Not the revenge. That was already done. And without shouting, without scenes, without breaking a single window. No. I was thinking about the aftermath. The moment when the people who assumed they owned your future realize you've already walked away from it. It came sooner than I expected. Wednesday morning, my phone rang at 9:14. Alan. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, a second call, then a text. "Hey Mom, just checking in. Thought maybe we could stop by this weekend." Of course they did. They felt something shift, a wind moving through a door they didn't know was open. I didn't answer. Let them wonder. That afternoon, I was folding laundry when I heard footsteps on the porch. Not hurried, not stealthy. Familiar. The doorbell rang. Twice. Then came the knock. I opened the door slowly, pressing my hand to the frame out of habit, more than necessity. Matthew stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed into a line so tight you could snap thread with it. He didn't smile. "Hi, Nana," he said flatly. "Matthew?" I replied, not moving aside. "Dad said maybe we should come see how you're doing." "After all this time?" I asked. He shrugged. "We've been busy." I leaned on the doorframe. "What do you need?" His eyes flickered. "Need? Nothing. Just heard you might have had some questions about property stuff. That envelope I sent—" "I didn't," I said. I had no questions. I understood it perfectly. A beat passed. He shifted his weight. "Did you talk to the bank?" "No," I said. He exhaled, relieved. "I talked to my lawyer." He blinked. "Your lawyer?" I nodded. "Wallace Jensen. You might know him. Most people in town do. He says hello, by the way." His jaw tensed. "Why would you—" "Because I'm not dead," I said. He looked like he wanted to say something cruel, but he didn't. He just stood there, caught between pretending this was a social call and demanding answers. "I'm busy," I added, and began to close the door. He stepped forward, hand on the frame. "Wait. What are you saying?" "I'm saying," I said, calm as a lake, "you should tell your father to stop making weekend plans." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. I hadn't. Not yet. "Are you okay?" he asked finally, voice low. "I've never been better." I closed the door. The sound of it clicking shut was more satisfying than I expected. Not dramatic, just final. I returned to my laundry, humming a little as I worked. There's a rhythm to folding towels that feels like restoration, like control. Matthew didn't come back. But that evening, Alan called again. I didn't pick up. Let them wait. Let them wonder. The next knock would come soon enough, and I already had the tea ready. Friday came with the kind of clear sky that always made James say, "Someone upstairs is trying to make up for yesterday." I stood on the porch in my cardigan, sipping tea, watching a squirrel methodically destroy the petunias I'd planted last month. Small chaos in a quiet life. I had just settled into my chair when the car pulled up. Alan's. Of course. He didn't call this time. No text. Just showed up like the house still belonged to him, like time and trust hadn't broken clean in two. He stepped out with that slow, careful pace of someone preparing their argument before they've heard the charge. He was dressed too well for a casual visit. Slacks, pressed shirt, no jacket, the "I'm just here to talk" look of someone about to ask for something. I didn't move from my chair. "Morning, Mom," he said as he walked up. "Mind if I sit?" I motioned toward the other chair without speaking. He took it, legs crossed, hands folded, just like his father used to do when he was trying not to admit guilt. "I've been thinking," he began. "We should spend more time together. Maybe have you over for dinner next week. Is Matthew cooking?" He hesitated. "No, Marla." "Ah." We sat in silence. He cleared his throat. "Matt said he came by. Said you were upset." I sipped my tea. "Mom," he continued, his voice dropping into that syrupy tone he used when selling me on bad ideas. "I know sometimes things get twisted. Emotions get in the way. But I think maybe you've misunderstood our intentions." "No," I said. "I haven't. We were just trying to make sure everything was in order, in case something happened. Something like me dying." He winced. "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that, Alan." He leaned forward. "Mom, come on. This house, it's a lot for you. We just wanted to make sure you were safe, that your affairs were managed." "My affairs," I repeated. "You mean my assets? That's not fair. Isn't it?" He shifted in his seat. "Matthew's young. He speaks without thinking. I told him to cool it. But you know how kids are. He's not a kid. He's family." "So was I," I said, "until I stopped being useful." He looked away then, down at his shoes. Probably expensive. Probably paid for with the bonus he got the year I loaned him money, just until March. "I've done everything for you," I said softly. "Your father and I built this home from nothing. I paid your college tuition, covered your first mortgage when you defaulted, sent money when your roof leaked, when your car failed, when your job fell through. I was always there." "I know." "No, you don't. If you did, you wouldn't have sent your son to my door with a form and a lie in his smile." He looked up then, eyes tired. "So what now?" "I've changed things," I said. "Legally. The house won't pass through you." His face went still. "What do you mean?" "I mean it's not yours to wait for." There was a long pause. Then, "You sold it?" "No." "Then who?" "A good person." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stood slowly, the bones in my knees cracking a little like old floorboards. I took my cup and walked past him toward the door. "You should go, Alan." He stood, but didn't move. "I'm still your son," he said, voice low. I turned back, hand on the doorframe. "And I'm still your mother. But love doesn't exempt anyone from consequence." He stared at me a moment longer, then walked down the steps without a word. The car door slammed harder than it needed to. I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the picture of James above the mantel. "Well," I said aloud, "I think he knows now." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. I thought they'd leave me alone after that. But silence, I've learned, is never the end, just the intermission before the storm. The next week, I got a letter from a lawyer. Not Wallace, of course. This one had a name like a toothpaste brand and the charm of a tax audit. The envelope was thick, printed on expensive stock, with language carefully chosen to sound polite and feel like a knife. "Dear Mrs. Hollister, we are writing on behalf of your son, Mr. Alan Hollister, in regard to the recent changes concerning the deed to your primary residence. It has come to our attention that said changes may have occurred under duress or confusion, and we kindly request further clarification before any formal challenges are pursued." Challenges. They wanted to contest the transfer. I didn't slam the letter on the table. I didn't even sigh. I just folded it neatly, returned it to the envelope, and set it beside the sugar bowl like it was any other bit of mail, something that might be used to line a drawer. An hour later, I called Wallace. "They're pushing," I said. "Expected," he replied. "They thought you'd leave your keys in a will." "They weren't prepared for you to use them while alive?" "Can they reverse it?" "No. The deed is filed. The transfer is legal and final. The only thing they can do is waste paper and money." "Let them," I said. He chuckled. "I already drafted a response. Want to read it?" "No," I said. "I trust you." I spent the afternoon in the garden, trimming the roses. James used to say pruning was the only form of violence he believed in. Cut back what no longer serves. Make room for the bloom. That night, Ezra knocked on my back door. I was surprised, but not startled. He had a way of arriving without disrupting the air around him. "Did I come at a bad time?" he asked. "No such thing these days." He stepped inside, holding a paper bag. Brought pie. Fig and walnut. The good kind. He set it down, and we sat at the table like we'd done it 100 times before. "I got a call," he said after a moment, "from some guy named Lansing. Said he was with a firm that had concerns about the property. Asked if I knew what I'd signed, if you'd coerced me." I snorted. "Did you tell him I threatened you with a tea kettle?" Ezra smiled. "I told him I read every line, twice, and that if anyone had questions, they should take it up with my notary." "He won't call again," I said. Ezra's smile faded a little. "Why are they so angry?" he asked. I looked down at my hands. "Because they spent years imagining a future they didn't earn, and now that it's gone, they're blaming the one person who didn't promise them anything." He nodded, quiet again. "You regret it?" I asked. He looked at me, square in the eyes. "No, not 1 second." We had the pie with strong coffee, black and bitter, the way James liked it. Ezra washed the dishes without being asked, drying them with the towel that still had embroidered tulips from a church fair in '92. Before he left, he paused at the door. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the house. I don't want to change anything, not while you're here, not after if I can help it. It's yours. It always will be." I didn't speak. Couldn't. He nodded once and left. I stood in the quiet afterward and realized something strange. I wasn't alone anymore. Not in that false way people use the word, surrounded by voices, ignored in everyone, but truly not alone. Because Ezra had seen the house as a home, not a prize, not a legacy, a place. And sometimes, a place is all we have to give. They didn't come for the birthday. Mine, I mean. 79. Not a card, not a call. Not even a half-hearted message on that app. Matthew once tried to install for me. So you can stay in touch. I stayed. They didn't. The morning was quiet. The sky a soft blue. The kind James used to call unbothered. I made myself pancakes. 2, not 3. I was too old to lie to my own appetite. Brewed coffee strong enough to wake the ghosts. Then I sat by the window and watched the street breathe. The phone stayed still all morning. I didn't expect anything. But the silence still hummed. Just after lunch, the doorbell rang. Not Alan, not Matthew. Ezra. He stood on the porch holding a small potted orchid and a paper bag with a handwritten tag that said, "Cafe Special, no charge." "Happy birthday," he said, not loudly. I stared at him for a second too long, then stepped aside. "You didn't have to do this." "I know." I took the orchid like it was made of glass. "You remembered?" I asked. We sat at the table. He unpacked the bag. A thick slice of almond cake, a jar of fresh ground coffee, and a small envelope. No brand logo. Just my name written carefully. I opened it. Inside was a photo of the house, taken from the sidewalk in the early evening light. The porch glowed. My chair was empty, but there. The maple tree cast long shadows across the lawn. On the back, he'd written, "This place saved me. Thank you for letting it be yours first." I looked up at him, blinking faster than I'd like to admit. "I don't deserve this," I said. "You do." "I didn't think anyone would show up today." I did. We ate cake. He told me about a leak in the cafe's roof, a customer who offered to fix it in exchange for a year's worth of espresso. I told him about the time James tried to patch our gutters with duct tape and willpower. The kitchen felt lighter, not happier exactly, just less heavy. Like grief had taken the day off. When Ezra left, he hugged me. Not quick, not awkward, just enough. As he walked down the path, a car pulled up fast at the curb. Alan's. I didn't move. He slammed the door hard and strode up the walkway, expression tight, jaw clenched. Ezra slowed his pace, gave him a nod. Alan didn't return it. "Who the hell is that?" Alan snapped, pointing back at Ezra's retreating figure. "His name is Ezra," I said. "He brought cake." Alan scoffed. "And what else is he bringing? Lawyers? Fraud? You think this is funny?" "I think," I said, "that you're late." "For what?" "My birthday." That stopped him, just for a breath. He ran a hand through his hair. "I've been busy. Works." "No." "What?" "Stop," I said. "You don't get to lean on excuses today. You had time to call a lawyer, to draft a threat, to send your son with paperwork, but not to call your mother on her birthday?" He didn't answer. I stepped aside from the door. Not to let him in, just to give myself space. "I want to see the deed," he said suddenly. "You can go to the county clerk's office. It's public record." "You really gave it to that guy?" "Yes." "Why?" I looked at him hard, then said, "Because he's the only person who's come through this door without an agenda." Alan laughed once, bitter and short. "You've gone senile." "No," I said calmly. "I've gone free. You're making a mistake." "I made one," I replied, raising a son who sees me as a stepping stone. His mouth opened and closed again. The wind picked up slightly. A leaf blew past his feet. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. "Matthew's furious," he muttered. "He should be." Alan looked at me then, something raw in his eyes. Not regret, not love, just confusion. Like he couldn't believe I was standing there unbroken. "I don't get it," he said. After all I've done for you." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You mean the holidays you skipped? The lies? The way you raised your son to treat me like a nuisance?" "I gave you a life," he hissed. "No," I said. "I gave you one." He stood there breathing hard, then shook his head and backed off the porch. "This isn't over," he said. "It is for me," I replied. He left. I didn't watch him go. I returned to the kitchen, cut another slice of cake, and poured a second cup of coffee. James would have grinned at the spectacle. "About time," he'd say. "You were always too patient." But I wasn't, not anymore. Not when I had finally given my home to someone who saw it as shelter, not inheritance. Not when I had chosen peace over blood. Not when, for the first time in years, I had something sweet to eat and no one left to impress. 3 days later, they broke in. Not with force, not at first. Not the kind you call the police over. This was quieter, meaner. I came home from the pharmacy to find my back door open, not wide, just enough to tell me it hadn't shut behind someone. Inside, nothing was stolen, nothing was broken. But something had been touched. The drawer where I kept the deed copies was open, not ransacked, not messy. Just open, as if someone had searched, then decided to pretend they hadn't. I stood there in the kitchen, holding my purse, staring at that drawer like it had whispered my name. The air felt off, too still, too measured. I checked the rest of the house. The photo albums on the shelf were slightly shifted. The hallway rug had a corner folded under. My bedroom closet door, never quite straight on its hinge, had been pulled too wide. Someone had been here. Someone who thought they still had a right to be. I didn't call Alan. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I called Wallace. He picked up after one ring. "Mrs. Hollister? They've come into the house." Pause. Then, "You mean legally?" "I mean through the back door." Another pause, this one heavier. "Are you all right?" "Yes." "Anything missing?" "No." "I'll have a security system installed by the end of the day," he said. "My firm uses a company. Discreet, fast, no keypad nonsense. Facial camera, auto alerts. No one will come near that property again without you knowing it." I closed the drawer slowly, hands steady. They were looking for the deed. It's filed, public. They can't unsign your hand. "Still," I said, "they want to find something, a way back in." "They won't." And I believed him. Still, I didn't sleep well that night. I sat in the armchair by the front window, the one with the crocheted throw and the lopsided leg, and I watched the street, not like a paranoid woman, like someone protecting the last of what she earned. Around midnight, a figure moved past the porch. I didn't flinch. It was Ezra. He saw the lamp on and paused. Then, without knocking, he raised a hand in greeting and sat down on the swing. No fanfare, no fear, just presence. I opened the window. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked. "Nope," he said. "Long day, bad coffee, too many thoughts." "Join the club." We sat in silence. Different spaces, same breath. "I heard," he said finally, "that they were inside. News travels fast?" "It does when one of your baristas has a cousin who installs security cameras." I smiled faintly. "I don't like that they came here," he said. "They didn't take anything." "That's not the point." I looked at him, truly looked. "You understand," I said, "that this house is still mine, even with your name on paper." "I know. And when I go, it's yours. All of it." He nodded. "So protect it. Not because it's property, but because it's history." Ezra's eyes were dark and serious in the porch light. "I will," He stood after a while and left, without needing a good night. The next day, the system was installed. Tiny cameras, smart locks, an alert on my phone that pinged whenever motion crossed the door. The first alert came at 3:12 p.m. Matthew. He didn't knock. Just hovered. I watched from the living room as he paced the porch like a boy outside detention. Then he tried the door, casually, like maybe he thought I forgot to lock it. It didn't budge. He peered through the window. I didn't move. Eventually, he walked away. The camera caught the moment he turned back, looking at the house like it had betrayed him. I saved the clip. Not for evidence, for memory. To remind myself what it looked like when the weight of entitlement finally collapsed under its own emptiness. The letter arrived a week later, wrapped in expensive paper and cowardice, typed, formal, soulless. It was from Alan's lawyer again, full of phrases like emotional instability, possible manipulation, and elder vulnerability. They were now suggesting that Ezra had taken advantage of me, that perhaps I hadn't been of sound mind, that perhaps the transfer should be reviewed. Challenged. Reversed. I laughed. Aloud, alone, at my kitchen table. Sound mind. I'd never thought clearer in my life. I set the letter beside the potted orchid Ezra had given me, the blooms now bright and stubborn in the morning sun. That little plant had more backbone than half my family. I didn't call Wallace. I didn't need to. He'd already warned me this would come. He had answers for every accusation, paper trails for every step. Instead, I called Ezra. "Do you have time for a walk?" I asked. "Always," he said. We met at the corner by the library, under the same maple tree James and I used to pass every Sunday after church. Its leaves had started to change, a slow fire spreading from tip to stem. We walked without urgency. Two shadows on pavement. No destination, just motion. "I got another letter," I said. "I figured. They're saying you manipulated me." Ezra looked down at the sidewalk. "Want me to disappear?" I stopped. He turned to me. "No," I said. "I want you to come to dinner." He blinked. "I haven't made pot roast in years," I continued, "but I've been thinking about it, about cooking for someone who doesn't see it as a transaction." "I don't deserve—" "You didn't earn the house," I interrupted. "But you received it. That's different. That's better." He nodded, slowly. We walked on. Later that evening, I stood in my kitchen, hands deep in carrots and onions and memories. The pot simmered like a song I hadn't heard in years. The kitchen filled with scent, thyme, garlic, heat. Ezra arrived just before sunset. He brought bread and a story about a girl who proposed to her boyfriend in the middle of the cafe during a cappuccino spill. Life, it seemed, kept happening out loud. We ate. And when the dishes were cleared and the last bit of gravy wiped from the plate, I showed him the letter. He read it quietly, folded it once, set it down. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be," I replied. "They're only proving why I had to do it." He nodded. "If it helps, I've started writing down everything, every interaction, every decision. I don't want them to have an inch of doubt to exploit." "That helps," I said. "But they won't win." "I know." We sat on the porch afterward. The wind was cool, but not unfriendly. A storm in the distance rumbled without promise. "I want to tell you something," I said. Ezra looked over. "This house, it almost broke me. Not because of what it is, but because of what it became to them. A finish line, a reward, a vault. And I nearly let them win just by staying quiet." "You didn't." "No," I said. "I didn't." He was quiet for a while, then asked, "Why me?" I looked at him. That strange boy with calloused hands and a heart too wide for his chest. Because you walked into my life without expectation, I said. Because you showed me that strangers can be kinder than blood. Because something in me said yes when everything else had said no for years. He didn't respond. Just sat there. Steady. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for explanation. The kind I'd missed. I woke up to find the roses cut down. All of them. Every stem, every bloom. Gone. Just clean shears to the base and dirt left behind. It wasn't kids. Kids don't use gardening gloves or trim with precision. Whoever did it had patience and spite. I stood on the back porch in my robe, staring at the naked soil. My hands didn't shake. My jaw didn't tighten. I just watched the empty space where something beautiful used to grow. Then I went inside and made coffee. I called no one. I took no photos. I said nothing to the neighbors. I just went to the cabinet, found the old box marked spring, and pulled out the packet of tulip bulbs James had bought on clearance 30 years ago and forgotten. I'd always meant to plant them. I never had, until now. The ground was soft from last night's rain, easy to dig. I worked slowly, methodically, kneeling into the dirt like a woman doing penance or prayer. Each bulb went in deep, covered, tucked, safe. By noon, I was done. I stood and brushed the soil from my palms. I didn't cry. Grief requires hope. This was just clarity. Someone wanted to hurt me. But they didn't know the thing about gardens. They come back. Always. Even if the hands that planted them don't. That afternoon, Ezra came by. He brought a thermos of soup and a new pot of daisies. They're not roses, but they're stubborn, he said. I didn't tell him about the garden. He'd find out in spring. Instead, we sat at the kitchen table while the soup steamed between us. The house was quiet, but full. I realized I hadn't thought about Alan or Matthew all morning. Not once. And when I did now, it wasn't with pain. It was with distance. They'll try again, Ezra said softly. Your son. His lawyers. They won't like losing. Let them dislike it, I said. It's good for people like that to sit with their failures. Teaches them it's not always someone else's fault. He smiled a little. I have a question, he said. Ask it. When the time comes, do you want a plaque? A plaque? Something simple. To say you were here. That this place didn't just exist. It mattered. You mattered. I stared at him, then nodded. Not a big one. Of course not. Something that says, she stayed. Even when they didn't want her to. I'll make sure of it, he said. We finished the soup. He left before dark. I stood by the window for a while, looking out at the garden. I thought about all the hands that had moved through this house. James's hands, rough from tools and tender with my back. Alan's baby fists gripping furniture as he learned to walk. Matthew's teenage palms stuffed into pockets as he stared at the floor. They all passed through. But only I had stayed. And now Ezra, not by blood, but by bond. That night, I wrote my last letter. Not to Alan, to the house. You were never just wood and brick. You were love and drywall, safety and stairs. I fed you with laughter and patched you with tears. You kept me, you taught me, you owed me nothing, and still you held me. I give you now to someone who sees you the way I did. Stay kind. Stay strong. Stay whole. I folded it, slipped it into the drawer by the stove, for someone to find, one day, after. I didn't feel old until the morning I didn't reach for the kettle, not because I forgot it, but because I didn't need it. The house was warm. The air was still. The silence for once was not absence. It was peace. That day, I stayed in bed until the sun stretched across the floorboards, touching the same corners James used to sweep with his socked feet, humming some tune from Before I Ever Knew Him. I let the quiet settle into my bones, let it speak without urgency. There was nothing left to wait for, no doorbell to dread, no mailbox full of threats disguised as concern, no phone calls from voices that only remembered me when their lives felt small. Alan hadn't returned since the last visit. Matthew had gone silent. The letters stopped. Ezra came by each week, sometimes with pie, sometimes with soup, once with a broken radio he didn't want to fix alone. He never stayed long, just enough to remind me I wasn't fading, just enough to make sure I still had a place in someone's day. The tulips never came. Too old, probably. Too long buried in the dark. But I didn't mind. The act of planting was the act of reclaiming. Of saying, this ground is mine, even if nothing blooms. Instead, the daisies thrived, and the lavender, and the stubborn patch of mint by the back fence that refused to die no matter how many winters came. I wrote no will. I had nothing left to assign. Ezra had the house, and with it, everything that mattered. The only thing I added, quietly, carefully, was a note tucked in the deed folder. If you ever want to give it away, do it with your eyes open. Don't pass this place to someone who only sees square footage. Give it to someone who needs a home more than they need a reward. Weeks passed, then months. The ache in my knees grew meaner. My breath grew shallower. The mirror became less familiar, but not cruel. Time didn't sneak up on me. It arrived with dignity. On my last morning, I made tea, just the way I liked it. I sat by the window and watched Ezra rake leaves across the yard. He didn't see me watching, and that was best. He worked slowly, with care, as if the leaves mattered. I liked that about him. I finished my tea, and I folded my hands in my lap, and I let go. Ezra found me by the window, peaceful, pale, hands warm but still. He didn't call anyone at first. He sat with me for an hour, no panic, no rush. Then he made a call, not to Alan, not to Matthew, to Wallace. Arrangements were made, quiet ones, no drama, no arguments. A week later, he placed a small plaque by the front steps, discreet, set in stone, not brass. It read, "She stayed, even when they didn't want her to. Agnes Hollister, 1946-2025. And under it, this home was built by hands that knew both work and love. People came, not many. A few neighbors. Nora, in her tired cardigan and sharp tongue. The woman from the pharmacy. Ezra stood by the porch with his hands behind his back, letting the wind carry what it needed to. Alan didn't come. Matthew sent an email. Ezra deleted it. In time, the house became part cafe, part community space. The kitchen stayed the same. The porch swing was repaired. The roses, they grew back. Bright, unapologetic. Ezra never changed the wallpaper in the hallway, even when customers suggested it looked dated. He'd smile and say, "She picked it. That's enough." And sometimes, late at night, after the lights were off and the door was locked, he'd sit by the window with a cup of tea and swear he could still hear her humming from the garden. Not loudly, but clear enough to know. She was never gone. She had just finished her part and left behind something better than legacy. She left proof that you don't need to shout to win. You just need to say no and mean it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. Leave a comment, let them know they're not alone. And if you've ever chosen peace over noise, you already know what real strength looks like.